What better way to overcome your fears than to chase them head on? That's been my motto throughout my whole life. When I was 5, my father locked me inside a room full of spiders to show me that they were nothing to be afraid of. And it worked. After day 3, I was no longer scared of the 8-legged creatures that used to haunt my dreams. That is why I have decided to dedicate my life to helping others overcome their truest fears, the things that haunt their nightmares, waking or sleeping. After a few years of trial and error, I finally created a program that would surely help. At least, that's what it was intended for. The reality of it turned out to be much more sinister. On July 8th, 6 people signed up for my new study. They were all healthy, young adults who were eager to overcome their fears while also looking forward to the generous lump sum of money that was offered as a reward upon completion. On paper, their fears were your typical phobias. Nothing too out there. What I didn't expect was the lies that each of them told. I have kept their journals from the study and will now transcribe them below. Patient number 1, John Holland. Day 1. I'm supposed to write in this journal for the results of some experiment put on by a psychologist. He runs this place and has this mirror that he thinks will expose me to my greatest fear. Have to say, I'm doubtful. He gave some explanation about the amygdala and the fear response in the brain, which I sort of understood from my psychology classes and random Google searches I've done. I'm a Googler. I'm supposed to be writing down my experiences with my fear of germs. I have been diagnosed with your stereotypical OCD, cleanliness obsessions fueled by extreme germophobia. My host led me to the mirror expectantly and whipped off the white cloth cover with a flourish. In the mirror, I realized on first glance how I looked like my father. A memory overlaid my vision momentarily. Spotless white floors, marred only by a spot of blood that had dripped unnoticed from my blistered hands. My father's disapproving face as he raised his belt one more time. His words echoed once more in my mind, punctuated by further blows, words I dare not repeat that make me shrink inwardly, as I did then as a child. A touch on my arm startled me out of a dazed state, yanking me back to the present. You all right, John? Do you have a journal? The question surprised me. I just told him I hadn't had one in years. A grin splits his face as he walked to a cabinet and opened a drawer with several small books, journals. Not identical, but similar enough. He grabbed one with an uneven black cover with scales and handed it to me. I decided not to ask why he would have multiple journals sitting in a desk drawer. Write in it. I'd be interested to read what your experience is. So here I am, not feeling much different, lying on my bed while my wife Olivia sleeps. Day 2. I didn't sleep too well last night. My dreams were much the same as my memory that had risen as I looked in the mirror. I saw my father's face once more, but it was different than I had remembered. His face was contorted, but not in anger, but in terror. What could a man so terrible be afraid of? I'll write more later. 11:08 p.m., same day. I don't know what to say. My 6-year-old son was being hyper, and I've been plagued by a constant pressure in my head. Some kind of migraine. Everything today seemed designed to piss me off. Bright lights, noise. It never seemed to end. Olivia was nitpicky. It finally hit a breaking point when Tyson wouldn't go to bed at 8 o'clock like he should. I found myself getting more and more angry. I feel like screaming now. Tyson was being so defiant, and my anger only grew and grew until I ended up yanking him off the couch by his feet. He hit his head on the wooden floor of our living room. I stopped when I saw blood and he started crying. I sadly picked him up and carried him to his room when Olivia asked why Tyson was crying. I told her that he slipped and hit his head. Had I really hurt my own child, my own son? I laid on the floor, feeling like retching the darkness from my soul. What was happening to me? This isn't about cleanliness at all. I had just lied to my own wife. Day 3. The guilt is overwhelming, but I can't stop myself from hurting my son when he disobeys. My wife never seems to take notice. The morning after I hurt him, he woke up and acted as if nothing had happened. When asked about how he felt, he said, "I don't feel so good. I better be more careful on the hardwood. It's so easy to slip." He didn't remember a thing. I'll admit I have begun hurting him more to see if he will remember. I want to get caught, to be punished for what I've done, for what I'm doing. But the consequences never seem to come. I killed a man. I was walking out at 3 p.m., trying to run from the decay of my morals, running from the truth of my dissent. I don't sleep anymore. The shame and desperation keep me awake all night. I saw a man walking and realized that if I was to be punished and stopped, I needed to do something more drastic. It was the only way. I took out my keys and, in cold blood, stabbed the man in the neck. I called the police to confess and held my bloody keys in hand until they arrived. I did it. I killed him. Take me away. They walked past me as if they didn't see me and rushed to the body. We need to find out who did this. This was brutal. Nothing works. I'm a monster, a ravenous wolf who walks among blind lambs. The things I have done to break this spell, I wish I could undo everything. My conscience is dull, though. I should care, but I don't. The wind blows over the deep hole in my soul. I can almost hear a whistle howling. I killed my father. Now I realize that the man at the Airbnb was right. I have faced my worst fear. It wasn't germs or even general uncleanliness. After I shoved my father's head in the oven on high heat, his body thrashing, his face showed pure terror that I had seen that first night after I'd hurt my son. My fingers shake as I write this. I am not my father. I am much worse than he ever was. Patient number 2, Susan Thompson. Day 1. I woke up feeling really heavy this morning. I had a bad dream again last night. I think it is the after effect of that weird experiment I went to yesterday. There was something off with that place. I shouldn't have volunteered. But I can't blame myself for it. Being a primary school teacher doesn't pay much. Volunteering for that science experiment, I earned $1,000 in 12 hours. I was all right when I came home that night. It was pretty late, so I skipped dinner as usual and went to bed. I wish I hadn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw myself trapped inside a huge glass box. I couldn't find a way out, and I'm sure if I'm stuck in that box for a few more minutes, I'd have no oxygen to breathe. I tried to shout for help again, but nothing but air came out of my mouth. I felt helpless. I tried moving my hands, banging the glass wall. Again, nothing happened. It was a different level of anxiety. I felt like I was losing all my senses. This has to be my imagination, but I feel right now is real in my mind. Suddenly, I hear a loud noise and wake up. It's 7 a.m. Day 2. I have to keep writing this journal. Things are getting crazier with each second. I'm definitely hallucinating. Today, I saw a terrifying creature lurking in the corner of the classroom. I went to the teacher's washroom to splash some water on my face. When I opened my eyes, the water coming out of the tap was red. What the hell? I looked again and it was transparent. I looked at the mirror. I was shocked to see the monstrous creature behind my back. I looked back, but it wasn't there. I looked in the mirror again, and there it was, looking right into my eyes. What was happening? Is this what he meant when he said you will face your deepest fear? I took the rest of the day off and went home. I was exhausted, but I can't sleep. I'm terrified of the suffocating feeling of being trapped and losing my own identity. It's just like when I was dating John. He was too clingy and needy. It was as if I was losing myself into that relationship. I always thought I was better off alone. Whatever it is, I have to stay awake. I can't sleep. The creature is at my home. It's following me everywhere. Day 3. It's dark again. I haven't slept in 72 hours. My eyes are burning, but I have to type how I feel right now. I don't think I can do this anymore. I'm losing my sanity. The creature is closer now. It was looking straight at me, waiting for me to go to sleep. Then it will eat my flesh. I can see its insatiable hunger in its eyes. I'm not going to close my eyes. Shit! That fucking monster is in my bed. I might have closed my eyes for a sec. Oh my god. I don't think I'm going to make it. Now that it is closer, I see the shape of a creature. It looks like a wolf, but not a majestic one. It's thin with a lot of injuries on its body. There was flesh missing from its body like it had been scooped out. Every time I am taking my eyes off that monster and look at my laptop to type the journal, it feels like it's coming closer. Too close. I need to scare this thing away from me. I look around desperately to find something to protect me from the monster, and by mistake, I look at the mirror. There's a man behind me. It's John, with an axe in his hand. Patient number 3, Shelby Smith. Day 1. After so many years of suffering, I think I finally have a chance of having a happy birthday. The study wasn't as difficult as anticipated. I loved what they did with the mirror. In all my years of haunted houses, I've never seen anything like that. I'm excited at the prospect of looking forward to enjoying life instead of being afraid of it. Also, they gave me enough money to afford a down payment on a better car. First, I need to clean my house. I've been so busy I haven't noticed how dusty it's become in here. My dog Rosa's been sneezing like crazy. Day 2. I'm not feeling as well as I'd hoped this morning. There's a weighted pain in my chest. Maybe I picked something up from one of the other subjects. That's the last fucking thing I need right now. It's like, hey, you aren't afraid of getting older anymore. Congratulations. Now we're gonna put that to the test and make you feel like death. My eyes are playing tricks on me as well. This morning I walked by my mirror and had to do a double take. My crimson hair was smattered with silver. The smiling crow's feet around my eyes were deep valleys, facial reactions to fond memories. I raised both my hands to my face. It still feels fine, smooth as a baby's ass, in fact. However, the me in the mirror clutches at her face with gnarled fists. Liver-spotted hands grasp at paper-thin skin. Hands so broken and twisted that they aren't making fists at all. It's their natural state. Not knowing what else to do, I take my normal, straightened, spot-free hands and try to wash the image away with water. Maybe I'm just hypersensitive because of the exposure therapy. At any rate, I look fine now and there's a lot to do. My house smells musty as fuck. It's turning my stomach. Day 3. Something's terribly wrong. I woke up to an aged bedroom. Yellowed wallpaper peeled at the corners and down the walls. Brittle bones creak with pained protests as I get out of bed. I call for Rosa, barely being able to hear my own voice. What is happening? In the corner of the room closet to my bedside table is a darkened heap. At first, I can't make out what it is, but upon closer inspection, find the mummified corpse of Rosa. Every mirror in my house shows the same ancient image. Wrinkles plague my face. The heaviness in my chest is so much worse than it was yesterday. What did it do to me? I feel like a computer that's shutting down, one program at a time. Patient number 4, Jason Holmes. Day 1. I'm sitting here staring at the page, trying to think of the best way to explain to you how I feel. The one thing that immediately comes up is anger. I guess that's the best way to put it. I'm pissed off about your fucked up experiment. I know I agreed to it, but I expected a few small centipedes in a normal room. Instead, you locked me in a room of mirrors filled with centipedes. And they were not small. You must have found the biggest ones you could and stuck them in there with me. I begged you to let me out, and you ignored me. You said this would cure me of an irrational fear, but all I know is I curled up in that corner and brushed those fucking centipedes off me as best I could until someone came and got me. And I don't feel better. I feel fucked up. But the only way I get my money now is to write this. Just what was with those mirrors? Was it so I could watch myself piss my pants? I certainly do not feel cured, only agitated and restless. I can still feel them crawling on me when I try to sleep. Day 2. It was a rough night and I'm still pissed off about everything, but now I think that something might be wrong. I should have never agreed to this shit. I went into the bathroom this morning and as I brushed my teeth, I watched a centipede crawl out of my eye, taking my goddamn eye with it as it crawled down my face. A hallucination for sure, my eye is fine, but later in the day, whenever I would look into that mirror, I would hear a voice. It sounds like the voice of my father, but he's been in prison for over 10 years now and we have no contact. I don't know what he's saying, it's incoherent. Auditory hallucinations. I've just been ignoring them. You really messed me up here. Day 3. There's a centipede in the mirror. Yeah, in the mirror, not on it. It's not one I can touch. It's like it's on the other side of a piece of glass. The ones that crawl on me in the mirror didn't scare me anymore. I can feel their legs skittering across my flesh, and they stop to take a bite out of me whenever they want. Maybe in some ways I am cured of my fear of centipedes. The one in the mirror, though, it's different. It's been speaking to me in my father's voice, telling me to do things I do not want to do. Things that landed my father in prison and ended my mother's life. I try not to look at it, but it's always there on the mirror, just yelling at me, telling me I need to take action against those who wronged me. I feel sick. I don't know how long I can deal with this thing yelling at me. Patient number 5, Finn Martin. Day 1. I was asked to keep a close record of the days following my session with the doctor, but I found it difficult to track the days once I got home. I remember that I was trying not to feel too optimistic, since I had several different kinds of therapy in the past, and they usually left me feeling more confident in my ability to conquer my fear of the dark. That, however, often proved incorrect as I quickly slipped into my previous mental state. Soon, it became clear that I had no cause for hesitation. I can't really say that I understand the curious treatment I was put through. I was rather skeptical of it, but I was in no position to say no. I would gladly spend an afternoon practicing breathing exercises in front of a mirror, no matter how silly I felt. All I wanted was to get rid of this crippling fear. I'm sure the other participants of this study have real issues to deal with, and that my fear of the dark pales in comparison. But my fear wasn't normal by any means. Lights out will leave me on the verge of hysteria, but the mere thought of an absence of light gives me anxiety. A dark corner, a shadowed passageway, the open door to the basement stairs, each step being swallowed by blackness, one by one by one, until nothing else is left. It has ruined my life. Once I came home and night fell, however, I could tell that I wasn't afraid anymore. I stared into the long shadows being cast in the corner of my room, and I took a deep breath. I felt no panic, no anxiety, not even the slightest hint of a tremor on the tips of my fingers. On the contrary, I felt an absolute peace, as if the absence of light not only didn't scare me, but also had become soothing. I was elated and told myself to pick up a pen and start writing down my report immediately, but I didn't. You see, the more I stared into the dark, the more I came to understand that the dark was looking back at me. Not a creature, not some spindly demon with red eyes and bad intentions. My imagination used to conjure up plenty of those to keep me company as I tried to fall asleep. No, I felt as if the darkness itself were looking at me, appraising me with a calculating stare. And though I knew I should have been terrified, I wasn't. Not because the darkness was kind. I could tell that it wasn't. Neither was it evil. It was simply inevitable, and I think I came to accept that. Day 3. I don't understand why I'm not scared. Just 3 days ago, I would have shouted my lungs out at the mere sight of a flickering light. The harmless dark bore terrible demons within that reached out bony hands at night to grasp my ankles if I didn't have the bedside lamp on. They were slow but persistent, waiting for its chance to pull me away from the light and into their shark-like mouths. Dark corners hid unspeakable terrors, and light was only salvation. I had always been scared of the dark and the dangers it concealed, but now I know better. Now, I know the dark hides nothing, it's only seeking me and I think it's beckoning me towards it, as if it wanted me to slip into the shadows. And I am not afraid. Fear is supposed to be a natural reaction to this, isn't it? But I think the treatment worked very well because I feel none of it. So this is my one and only report, a testament to this treatment, a letter of gratitude. Once I am done, I don't think I will resist anymore. I think I've been running away from the dark for too long. It might be time to let it take me. Thank you for your help. Finn. Patient number 6, Harley May. Your shitty little science project has ruined me, and I will never forgive you for it. You must be out of your mind letting anyone partake in this experiment. Do you even know what you're doing? Do you even know what you're putting people up against? Day 1. I was 100% on board with your cause. You told me you could help me with my self-esteem, to help me accept who I was, to help me feel comfortable in my skin. I knew the experiment called for exposure therapy, but just to lock me up in a room with a mirror, it was senselessly cruel. At first, I panicked, but there was nothing I wanted more than to be rid of my insecurities, to be able to look at myself and feel like, well, me. So I sat down on the floor and looked at the mirror from afar. I made sure I was just far enough so as not to see my reflection. However, I had a sudden burst of indignation. Why shouldn't I look at myself? Maybe there's nothing wrong with me. Maybe the fact that there's nothing wrong with me is why I'm here. Maybe this is the first sane decision I've made all my life. So hesitantly, I made my way to the mirror and took a look at myself. And I suddenly liked what I saw. I couldn't look away. Day 2. I woke up in front of the mirror. I ate breakfast while looking at my reflection. Thanks for the stale donuts, by the way. Really fucking appreciated that complimentary breakfast you advertised. And halfway through the day decided that I didn't hate myself. In fact, quite the contrary. My perspective had been skewed my entire life, and suddenly, I was enjoying watching myself. I would smile into the mirror, make faces into the mirror. I wanted to see every movement I made. I loved it. It was like some engrossing movie I couldn't look away from, except I was the star. I loved the way the lights off the ceiling shone in my eyes. I loved the way the dimples formed in my cheeks when I smiled. It was like I was truly seeing all of me for the first time. The mirror made me never want to look away. It was surreal but comforting. At times, I could barely tell which was me, the reflection, or the person looking at it. I was about to laud you as a genius, until the next day. Day 3. I woke up looking at myself yet again. This time, however, it was not in the mirror. I was looking at myself, looking into the mirror. When I stood up, I was watching myself stand up. When I walked around, I was watching myself walk around. My body turned to face the me that was looking at it, and I had a harsh derealization attack. It was like my perspective had changed to be outside my body. It hasn't stopped either. I have been stuck like this since your test. I watched myself do everything: drive, cook, eat, and sleep. I'm currently watching myself type this journal. Please get back to me ASAP. Am I just doomed to watch myself in third person for the rest of my life? If I'm not me, and I'm just watching me, am I still me? I don't even recognize the person I'm looking at anymore. As you can see, my mirror did in fact do its job. The only problem was that their true fears were much more sinister, and they were not ready to face them. I had anticipated this, though, hence why the mirror was created. Humans lie. For most of them, by the third day, their subconscious got the better of them, and I am saddened to say, they could not adjust. I still visit some of them in the psychiatric hospital or the jail cells that they now reside in, but unfortunately, they are too far gone to save. I am looking for 6 more subjects who will be open and honest with me about their fears, and who are ready to face them head on. Any takers? There's a place you can go, wherever you live. Doesn't matter the city, state, country, continent. You can find it if you try hard enough. For me, it was only about 45 minutes from my house. place might not be the right word, actually. You have to be looking for it. If you aren't consciously seeking it out, you won't see it. But it's more than that. Before I continue, I will say that there are certainly benefits to be reaped if you seek this place out. But I cannot stress enough the other end of that spectrum. You have to be ready, mentally. Your mind, it has to be strong. If you're uncertain, this place will exploit that. It will make your consciousness collapse into itself, leaving you a shell of a person you were before you went in. I want you to think about that. Think about lying in a bed or being propped up in a chair, your eyes open but not truly seeing anything. Imagine not being able to think. No pun intended, but think about that. Imagine your mind as a sea of endless dark. Now imagine being like that forever. Ponder the concept of forever. Complete blankness, pitch black, perfect dark. It's that every single day, every single night, for weeks, months, years, decades. Darkness that you're still awake in. And then you die, but it doesn't end. This place doesn't allow it to be the end. More years pass, more generations, centuries, thousands of years. Darkness that doesn't stop. You can't see, you can't hear, you can't smell. Darkness. Think about how much time will pass after you die. Think about the world evolving, devolving, deteriorating. Think about the earth dying, all of humanity being wiped away. For you, it's still nothing but pure darkness that you're still cognizant of. Think about the universe folding into itself, and everything just ends. Everything, that is, but the darkness in which you've spent the last millennia, alone, trapped inside a prison of your own making, unable to think but so very aware of what's happening, though you don't understand any of it and you can't do anything about it. At least for me, that's a terrifying prospect. In truth, the concept of forever doesn't even seem conceivable to my mind. It makes me sick to my stomach even thinking about it, but you deserve to know. I want to share this place with you, but I want you to know the risk. As I said, for me, it was just over 45 minutes away from my house. Outside the city in which I live lies miles and miles of farmland. I followed the instructions to the letter. I left the place I slept the night before, my house, at exactly 11:27 p.m. on a night when the moon was waning gibbous. I headed west. At points where the road going west ceased, I went only south until another road going west was available. Eventually, I ended up on a road between large fields of corn. That's when my car died. As was explained to me, this was to be expected. The instructions then said to wait, and that I would know when to turn my vehicle back on and perform the next step. I sat on that road for 7 minutes. All I could hear was the buzzing and chirping of cicadas and the occasional gust of wind. I don't know if it was gradual or sudden, but there was a moment when I realized that I could no longer hear anything. No wind, no cicadas, pure silence, perfect quiet. I took this to mean I was to continue. I turned my car back on. I closed my eyes. I believed I would find it. I believed it would work. I kept my eyes pressed tightly shut, and I pushed the gas pedal of my car down to the floor. My heart was beating out of my chest, my palms sweating, my knuckles white around my steering wheel. I don't know how fast I was going, but my car isn't slow, and I was flooring it with my eyes closed for, by my count, around 12 seconds. My car then died again. I opened my eyes. Before, I'd been able to see the lights of a farmhouse or two in the distance, but now those lights were gone. The moon and stars seemed to have dimmed too. I looked around, and just ahead of me on my left was a break in the cornfield. I didn't know if it was the road or if that was simply a perpendicular road that didn't continue to my right. I turned my car back on and made the left turn onto that road, hoping it was the right one. I drove slowly, unsure of what to expect if I were indeed in the right place. My rational brain took control for a moment, and I considered turning around and abandoning the idea entirely, a consideration that was quickly extinguished when I looked in my rear view and saw nothing but darkness. It was as if the darkness was following me. Every inch I moved forward, so it did it. But when I tried to reverse, the darkness stayed. I took that to mean I had no choice but to continue down the road. I don't know how long I was on the road. It could have been minutes. It could have been hours. While on the road, it was as if I couldn't comprehend time. I know that's a strange statement, but that's the only way I can think to put it. After following the road for however long, I crested a hill, and in the distance I saw a light. As I continued down it, I soon realized that there were actually two lights, one on either side of the road. As I approached the buildings, I tried to slow down, but the car kept a steady pace before dying completely, sending me rolling to a stop exactly between them. I then had a good view of them. The building on the left was a 2-story house like any you'd see in a suburban neighborhood. Steps led up to a large porch, and it was from the porch that the light was shining. It seemed all the lights in the house were off. To my right was a building that I can only describe as looking like a motel from the early 1900s. It didn't explicitly state that that's what it was, but it was a single-story wooden structure with a main set of double doors and 2 single doors on either side of it. A fixture on either side of the main doors provided the light on that side of the road. I looked in my rearview mirror, and it was like a solid black backdrop had been draped down behind the back of the car. I sat in my car, looking at each of the buildings. There didn't seem to be another soul in the area, just total silence, perfect stillness. Again, I don't know how long I sat there. Being on that road, it feels like you're in between being awake and unconscious, like you're in a dream but are unaware that you're dreaming. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's the only way to describe it. What I can describe is the fear I felt, the apprehension of getting out of the car. I'd rolled the window down at one point, and there was no smell in the air, no breeze, but there was a tension so palpable I could almost see it. It is not a place where people belong. What was the most afraid I've ever been, despite not knowing what I was in fear of, was exponentially amplified when I saw a figure coming towards me on the road. There was a slight limp in its gait, the only detail I could make out from as far away as I was. It was only a silhouette, breaking through the perfect darkness that lied past where the lights from the 2 buildings reached. My whole body seized up, and my heart leapt to my throat. I was completely and utterly petrified. I was trapped between an endless dark ocean behind me and something unknown in front of me. But I knew, in my body, my mind, my heart, my soul, that essence of my being, I knew that driving forward and trying to pass it was as undesirable a prospect as turning around and heading into the nothingness. I instinctively knew I needed to seek shelter in one of the buildings. I looked at them both again, then straight ahead. In the few moments I'd taken my eyes off whatever was approaching me, it had moved substantially closer. One moment it was 40 yards away, walking slowly, and the next it was 25 yards away, but it had never picked up speed. I tried to get out of the car, but my legs were rubber. It was like my fight or flight response had kicked in, and my mind had chosen flight, but my body wasn't able to follow through. It walked closer, and I was soon able to see that it wasn't an it, but a her. She wore a black dress that hung to her knees, and her hair was the same color and hung straight down her back. Her skin was pale and her arms gaunt. Her face was missing the lower jaw, and she had no upper lip. Her eyes were simply two black holes, and I could somehow tell that the darkness that lay behind me was the same that lay inside those hollow cavities. Seeing her face jump-started my body, and I flung the door open. I was torn. I didn't know in which structure I should seek safety. Both buildings silently called out to me, but each seemed more dangerous than the other. It was an impossible choice. Meanwhile, she continued walking towards me, taking deliberate, limping steps. I had to pick a building, and I had to pick it right then and there. I don't know when it happened, but at some point, a light in the house went on the second floor. Through the second floor window, I could see another silhouette, this one just standing in place, not moving. I looked over to the motel, and there too had a light gone on. And in a window next to the farthest door stood a silhouette. And both doors were now open. The woman approached, and I absent-mindedly ran towards the house. I went up the steps through the door, and I looked behind me, catching the briefest of glimpses of the woman who had inexplicably ended up on the porch just feet behind me before the door slammed shut and I was bathed in darkness. Behind her, the motel was ablaze in silent flames. It simultaneously felt like I was in that darkness for seconds and for years. I thought I'd failed, that I wasn't strong enough mentally to understand what it was trying to show me. I thought I'd soon lose the ability to know that, to even remember where I'd begun and what had become of me, but I didn't. I came back to my running car, parked between the two buildings, which now sat dark with no lights on. The motel wasn't burnt to the ground as I would have expected. The woman was nowhere in sight. The darkness still sat behind me, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I put my car in drive and started down the road. After only a few moments, I looked in my rearview and saw the darkness envelop the buildings. I soon came to a point where the road ceased its forward-going path and went only to the right. Beyond it and on both sides was that same darkness. I made the right turn, and in a single moment, one that blended around me, one that I wasn't conscious of but yet somehow noticed, I was on the road between the cornfields. I was back. The next morning, I drove to the psychiatric hospital to see my friend Luke. He lay in his bed, his eyes staring forward, void of any life behind them. They say it's all in his head, but I know better. I know the handprint-shaped scar he has on his forearm isn't a coincidence. We had learned about the road to nowhere at the same time. I'd gone the week after he did, knowing Luke to be someone to not follow directions as they should be followed. We'd been given the same instructions, the same warnings. He had failed. I sat by his side and told him in the best way I could about the road. I told him I wish I knew what it would have been like for him. From my understanding, everyone's experience is different. I don't know why I saw a house and a motel. I don't know who was in the windows. I don't know who the woman was. What I know is that I have a need, a primal urge to speak with someone else who experienced the road to nowhere and made it out. It's all I can think about. The road hasn't left my mind since the night it happened, which was about 2 years ago. I've lost my job. My wife left me. I haven't seen my kids in over a year. I need someone to find their road. I need someone to do it properly. I need someone with whom I can discuss the road. I need to know who the woman was. I need to know why the road exists. I need to know. Please, find your road. Please message me. Please help me understand its purpose. Please. That fucking feeling. You know that feeling in the pit of your stomach when someone is watching you? That feeling of goosebumps forming along your arms? The feeling of uneasiness festering deep inside? Fuck. It's been only a few weeks, but that feeling hasn't gone away. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. I work in one of the largest aquariums in Europe. For privacy's sake, I'll leave out the name of the aquarium. Given my passion for animals, I figured it only natural to try to help them out any way I could. I work as a vet trainee, so I was still very inexperienced when I got that first call. Emergency in the basement. Still getting acquainted with the layout of everything, I began to rush. A few wrong turns here and a few near collisions there was the perfect recipe for getting completely lost. Shit. Past the countless people and ceaseless habitats, there should have been a staircase. I must have missed it. I walked past Timmy doing his daily shake in his giant green puppy uniform. I don't know how he does it, kids spreading their germs all over you. The heat, low visibility, everyone watching. After waving at our guppy, I found the staircase, tucked away behind the gift shop. It's incredible how they get away with putting those things in the most unavoidable places. I started to walk down and felt a somewhat ominous feeling, now that the cacophony of voices was simmering down. The basement wasn't commonly visited part of the aquarium. We generally used it to store animals that were new, not popular upstairs, or were too popular. Animals need a break too. I hadn't visited the basement before that day, but as I stepped down the stairs, I clearly saw a staff member waving frantically. He indicated with a hand gesture that he wanted to be followed and then proceeded to turn around. In front of him stood a long and poorly lit concrete corridor. I rushed behind him. Apparently, the emergency came from the quarantine area located on the lower levels of the basement tunnel system. This is where we house the newer animals so that they can get checked for any pathogens before introducing them to their habitats. Everyone was freaking out about one of the new bonnethead sharks, who apparently was bleeding from the eye. Hyphema, I told myself. I really hope it's not perforated. After taking numerous turns, descending numerous stairs, and squishing ourselves between various kinds of water pipes, we finally got there. The manager of the area led me to a tank that read D02. I then asked the caretakers to get the shark close to the edge of the tank and place it with its belly facing upwards. This position triggers the tonic immobility reflex in sharks, and I was going to take advantage of it to explore its eye. Great! I smiled as I confirmed there was no perforation and I was going to be able to solve this all by myself. Some atropine drops and a few lidocaine injections around the eye did the trick, and suddenly everyone was congratulating me. I reassured them by saying it was nothing and that the blood would be reabsorbed soon enough. Everyone went back to their duties, and I was left alone with my bloated ego, trying to figure out how to get back to the surface without asking for help. I turned in circles for what felt like hours until I finally saw my ticket out of there. Hidden behind two massive metal containers was the door of what seemed to be a particularly narrow elevator. I figured that if I could ride it to the surface, I'd be able to go back to the vet lab in no time. So I stepped inside and pressed the highest button on the panel. None of them had any number on them, but I figured that would correspond to the surface level. The doors opened, and I saw a long corridor with immaculate white tiles on the floor and large blue panels on its sides. This spotlessly clean space was definitely not a part of the basement, but it didn't look like any of the surface areas either. I saw a large group of people walking on the other side of the panels, and I attempted to wave at them for directions, but I froze as I realized they were visitors and they didn't seem to be able to see me at all. What the hell? I stood still, staring at the aquarium's guests visible on the other side of the glass panels. They continued doing the normal touristy things, kids pointing excitedly at the tanks, parents trying to prevent them from banging on the glass. Slowly, I raised one arm and tried again to wave in the direction of the visitors. Nothing. I walked towards them, and the closer I got, the more that feeling of dread clenched my stomach. When I was about 8 feet away from the back of the tanks and the people crowding around them, I saw Timmy approaching them in his guppy uniform, doing his goofy swimming motions, trying to get the kids to copy him and follow him in the directions of the next room. I started waving again, anxiously this time, both arms crossing the air rapidly in front of me, trying to signal the people on the other side. No one reacted. I was starting to feel panicked there alone, with no idea how to get back to the main floor with everyone else. With slightly shaking hands, I decided to rap my knuckles loudly against the glass to try to draw Timmy's attention. I no longer cared if it distracted any of the guests from the exhibits. I just wanted to get the hell out of there. I hurried down the corridor, frantically knocking on the tanks as I tried to catch the attention of anyone on the outside. I started to notice the fish thinning out and figured I was just scaring them away with the commotion I was causing. After I got a few tanks down, I started smashing my knuckles, now bruised, against the transparent glass. I looked behind me, puzzled why nobody took notice. As I heard the sound of my knocking resounding through the tank, I realized something that made the pit in my stomach widen into a cavern. There were no fish anywhere in these tanks. From the outside, you could see fishes. But on the inside, it was clear that it was some sort of optical illusion, and most of the tanks were empty. My rising panic welled over, and I ran back down the corridor, my boots thudding against the tile beneath me. Between echoing footfalls and thundering chest, it felt like the ground itself was vibrating as I raced towards the door. The panic remained as I thumbed for any button or any switch to reopen the elevator. After a few moments spent pounding the stainless steel, I abandoned the door and sprinted back to Timmy in hopes of getting his attention. When I found him, he was rooms down the hall, his back to the glass with the school of students at his hips. Their chaperone stood a few meters away, her phone on its side, prompting everyone to smile. As I pounded on the glass, the phone's flash rang out again and again, the children laughing and changing poses with each flash. I couldn't help but notice that a kid that had strayed from the group was talking to an older man wearing a perfectly cut gray suit. I could read his lips forming the question, "Want to go see some rare fishes?" "Come on!" I yelled and threw my head back in desperation. Above me, the flashes illuminated what I thought were black ceiling panels, but revealed them to be darkly tinted glass. Just above the school group, I saw what looked like security cameras pointing at the tourists viewing the aquariums. I stood there, staring at those cameras. Our aquarium had always been boasting about its security, both for animals and visitors, and rightfully so. But these cameras simply couldn't be a part of the surveillance network. I mean, not when the security cameras were just feet away from the concealed ones, and the visible ones were clearly of a different kind. Besides, the older man knew exactly where to put himself so none of the official cameras caught him. As I stood there pondering why these cameras were there in the first place, I heard the elevator's mechanism come to life as it was called away. "Fuck!" I hissed as I ran for the elevator's doors, but there was nothing I can do. If the elevator was called away, someone had to have done it. The call button stopped glowing moments before the mechanism went silent, and then it lit up again as the elevator started moving back to this floor. "Shit!" I exclaimed and turned away from the shaft, running back down the corridor, leaving it in turns and bends until I reached the end and saw a door. Grasping the knob, I opened the door and ducked inside, closing it behind me. The room was completely different than the corridor, with cement walls and almost barren with the exception of a desk, a few cabinets, and a small closet. The only things on the desk were a laptop and a landline telephone. While I was contemplating my choices for a hiding spot, I heard the distant echo of footsteps coming down the corridor. A surge of newfound energy brought on by panic was all I needed to start looking around the room for hiding spots when my eyes fell on it. The door opened, and in walked a man whose face I knew. It was Johan, the manager of the caretakers. His face was stony and cold, his faded blue eyes almost shining as he looked around the room suspiciously. "I know you're in here," he said in a level yet quite clearly angry voice. "Come out now, and I won't hurt you." The fact that he took out a black handgun from the back of his camo shorts and rolled a black tube to its muzzle didn't really help to convince me. Johan slowly walked closer to my hiding spot, one hand extended forwards and the other holding the gun at chest level. I held my breath as he reached for the handle of the closet door and then swung the door open with a quick motion. He looked inside and then slowly closed the door before lowering the gun and moving to sit behind the desk. I didn't breathe until he made himself comfortable on the threadbare chair. Johan reached to the phone and lifted the receiver to his ear, dialing a number and then leaning against the desk with his head hanging low. The beeping sound of the connecting line echoed through the room. The line finally connected, and Johan raised his head, scratching his blonde stubble. "It's me. I'll need a guy here to fix the elevator. Yes, it's acting up again." He sighed, and sighed deeply. "Not him. The fucker sucked me dry the last time, and the elevator's still broken." The other guy said something that made Johan straighten up. "No, don't you even think that. I don't want that creep in here ever again." Johan yelled and his face contorted in anger. "I don't care how rich he is, if he has connections with an American president, or his name is a bad sound-alike to Einstein, that bastard isn't going to come here. Last time, a child went missing, Thomas. A child, for fuck's sake." He banged his fist on the desk. "I had to call the cops and pretend to look for the child while that psychopath had his way with his prey. He made me do that. He gets his thrills by thinking about how he won't ever be found out. And the nasty stuff he does, of course. A man like that puts the devil himself to shame. I don't give a fuck how much he is willing to give. One of these days he's going to get himself hanged, and God help me if that day I'm not laughing from a safe distance." Johan was silent as the other guy. Thomas spoke. "If you say so," he said with a sigh. "I swear the people that come back from him are not normal. They're more like puppets. But I'm done sticking my nose where it doesn't belong," he said and hung up. He leaned back on the chair, staring at the ceiling as long hair fell back and towards the floor. "Damn warlock pedophile," he cursed with a sigh and got up and walked out of the room, closing the door behind him. After making sure that I couldn't hear the sound of his footsteps at all, I pushed out of the vent grate and squeezed myself out of the duct, on top of the closet. I was lucky Johan hadn't noticed the broken edges of the grate, since I had to rip it off the wall. Thank God the screws holding it had been completely rusted and broke very easily. I put the vent back in its place and hopped down from the closet. My whole body was shaking. This was not what I signed up for, I thought, as I tried to collect myself. What the fuck do I do now? I had to get out of there. I took a deep breath and walked carefully up to the door. I hesitated, then opened it a few centimeters, enough to peer outside. Empty. I opened it a bit further, stuck my head out, heart pounding. Also empty. I snuck outside and closed the door quietly behind me. I walked down the way I came, turned the corner, and saw that the corridors forked. Had the fork been there when I ran down? I had no recollection of it, but in my panic, who knows? Well, 2 corridors meant a 50% chance that I get back to that elevator, so went left and kept walking. 5 heart-pounding minutes and a few more twists and turns. I was sure I had picked the wrong corridor. I was about to turn back when I spotted the ladder. Up the wall, into a small hatch, was a ladder as white as the corridor I was in. Up seemed like a good direction, and the elevator could be a suicide mission anyway, so I went for it. I opened the hatch, and hot, humid air rolled over me. I almost retched as the smell of old seaweed seeped out of a pitch black above me. The stench made my choice crystal clear. I'd roll the dice and try to find the elevator. I was halfway down the ladder when I heard it. Footsteps. The sound of several pairs of feet and heavy boots echoed down the hallway. The barely contained panic welled up inside of me, and I launched myself into the stinking heat of the room above. I took a few deep breaths and pulled my phone out of my pocket with shaking hands. I turned on the flashlight and almost dropped it. Dark-colored clandestine tiles covered the floor, identical to the ones I saw in the corridor. Looking around, I was petrified to see giant screens with the feed for the entire aquarium, scoping out much more than they should have. The scent was almost overwhelming, making the scenes below me that much more nauseating. Looking through the dark tiles, I saw Timmy pointing to a whiteboard, drawing out the anatomy of a shark. I'm glad he finally memorized what I showed him last week. The kids seemed to be very into it. Wait, what the fuck? In the next tile, I saw Timmy running in circles with the red guppy uniform. How the fuck did he change uniforms so quickly? He's not even in the same room as before. Confused, I look around to see I needed to walk across those tiles to get to the textured door on the other side of the wall. The door was slightly ajar, with a series of dents near the hinges. Hearing voices behind me, I figured the only way out of this situation was to move forward. Dread doesn't begin to describe how I felt when I looked through that next tile. Fuck! Timmy was outside of his uniform and was literally throwing kids into the fish tank to grab him fish to eat. Why the hell wasn't anybody stopping him? Kids literally banging on the glass, and Timmy refusing to let them out without grabbing him a clownfish. I guess he's taking his appreciation for Nemo to a whole new level. Panic welled up inside of me as I sprinted down the corridor towards the beaten-up door. A few tiles down, I saw Timmy with his arms elongating, legs looking like pasta after entering boiled water. His entire essence seemed to be vibrating, and he did not seem to mind. In fact, he started to caress the black tiles as I was walking over them. His smile disturbed me deeply. You might think, isn't it natural that an aquarium employee is smiling? Not that large. Everybody besides him was gone. Wait, they were looking up. Everybody's gaze was at me. Their eyes started to follow me as I approached the door, their smiles growing more and more forced with every tile I crossed. The last tile I crossed, I kept trying not to look down, trying to ignore everything I was seeing. I couldn't help but peek. I saw Johan staring at the roof, brushing his eyes? It was wrong. He was brushing his eyes almost neurotically with that same fucking smile. He kept brushing more and more aggressively, his legs now vibrating maniacally, joining the cadence of his aggressive brushing. I thought frantically about what I could do next. Quit this godforsaken job? Absolutely. Call the police? On what grounds? People were smiling too much, filming too much, and an overheard conversation at a room I had no idea where it was and had no right to be in? I reached for the door handle, trying to collect myself. I swear I saw an army of Timmys, all of them smiling too widely, before everything went black. I woke up at the aquarium infirmary, screaming as I noticed Timmy, the original one, by my side. He smiled normally. Hey, bub, we were worried about you. You seemed to have sudden stomachache, then passed out. You were feverish, too. We think you had bad food poisoning. We? Who are we? My brain screamed, but my body felt too weak. I had been knocked out for half a day, and it was almost time to go home. Timmy insisted in giving me a ride, but I rejected his offer, still terrified. Instead, I agreed to let him see me off to my Uber. Timmy was always awfully nice to me and to the kids. None of those things made sense to me. I tried so hard to dismiss all the hallucinations, everything that I saw, heard, and felt. But over the next days, strange things have happened. At first, it was my body, vibrating maniacally. I noticed that, but I didn't feel any discomfort, like having your limbs tremble that way was the most natural thing that could happen. After that, whenever I went to the restroom during working hours, I realized that I had a smile that was way too large plastered on my face. Keeping it felt completely normal, but trying to take it off was hurtful. Then I started feeling observed, but in a way that the bigger prey watches the smaller prey, knowing that there's something huge and irresistibly powerful in the corner waiting for it. And finally, today I saw an exact replica of myself inside one of the fish tanks. It waved at me with the largest smile I've ever seen. I watch my students rise from their desks and trundle into the hallway, praying that their forlorn looks stem from the fatigue of starting high school instead of my admittedly lengthy syllabus. Based on the amount of crumpled up balls of this meticulously crafted paper I had to scoop up from the floor, though, I doubted that I was going to be changing any lives this year. I watched the final student pass through the door and then plopped myself down in my chair behind my desk. Never before had I felt so worn out. My temples were throbbing, my feet were swollen, and my chest was stretched so tightly I felt like I was having a panic attack. You are going to kill it today, Ben, You were born to teach. The kids are going to love you. There's no doubt in my mind. The thought of going home and telling my girlfriend that I had chosen the wrong career filled me with dread. So I sat there, unmoving, with my head in my hands for almost an hour, trying my best to ignore the stench of my cologne, which saturated the air around me and had kids throughout the day as far back as the second row wrinkling their noses. Eventually, a custodian walked into my room and stirred me out of my stupor. I smiled at her weakly as she emptied the trash bin. She didn't return my smile though, and instead replaced the trash bag without so much as making eye contact. Based on her age, she had probably outlasted a million young teachers like myself, and knew that my pseudo-idealism would carry me to December at the latest. There was no point in getting to know me. I would be gone before the semester ran its course, broken and crucified by the apathy of my students and the vice grip of my administrators. She retreated from my room as quickly as she appeared. Wanting to further delay the embarrassment of returning home, I decided to rummage through my desk. There had been so many meetings the week prior that I had yet to peruse the half-dozen drawers. I was curious to see what, if anything, the previous owner had left behind. It was while searching through one of these drawers that I found a note. Dear replacement, under this note is the key to the closet. Please use it. Most rooms here don't have that kind of storage. You lucked out. Don't let the door close behind you. The doorknob sticks. Sincerely, Mrs. Allen. I lifted the note from the drawer and smiled at the tarnished key underneath. Mrs. Allen was right. I had lucked out. Most teachers in this decrepit building were lucky to have a filing cabinet in their room, much less a personal closet. To think that I had both lessened the sting of the day's failure a bit. I raised the key from the drawer and walked over to the closet. It was nestled near the right corner of the inside wall and was housed by a thick wooden door. I bounced the key in my palm a few times, appreciating its weight, and then placed it in the doorknob. The moment I opened the door, my senses were assaulted by a thick wave of decay. Never before had I encountered such an overpowering odor. I felt like my sinuses were being pummeled by boxing gloves fashioned from dead fish, and resisted the urge to gag. I fumbled for the light switch in the darkness. The closet was much deeper than I thought. The paltry overhead lights from the room only illuminated the first 5 feet or so. The rest of the closet was covered in shadows. I found the light switch a few moments later and flicked it on. A single light bulb came whirling to life and eradicated the shadows with its pale yellow glow. Resting in the left corner of the closet was a female corpse. The level of decomposition was extreme. Her skin had turned a pale green, and dark fluids dripped from her mouth and nose. Dozens of maggots were also nestled in the folds of her clothes, which were wrinkled and covered in dust. Just as I was about to turn around and vomit, the voice of the custodian sounded behind me. She must have returned to the room while my back had been turned. So that's what's been causing that horrible smell, she said. Who would have thought that the dead animal I've been hunting all summer was Mrs. Allen?